Welcome to the Finance Leaders Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Shaunelle Roeber. Shaunelle, can you just tell us a little bit more about your story?
Yeah, of course. You can never get enough of talking about yourself. So my story, I have a background in finance and mathematics, and I'm very passionate about numbers. I'm actually, if you go way back to when I first was growing up as a child, I grew up in this day and age when with two college graduate parents. Both of my parents are graduated from college, and that was very, very rare. They're very big with numbers, and numbers was just something that we learned and had around our household. Because I'm so passionate about helping people to reduce their taxes in retirement, it's always really fun to talk about the fact that I am actually the daughter of a former IRS or Internal Revenue Service auditor, and so I'm blessed with having my father walking this earth. He's 84 years old, and it's fun to say that I'm using tax codes to help people to save on taxes. I don't teach people how to evade them, but it is kind of fun having the lineage that I come from. And I found over the years, I am very empathetic, I think it's the right word. I find myself to be very empathetic with women in particular. A lot of women, I come from a generation where a lot of women have become more empowered. There's been many, many things where women have been able to take and run with life and go to college and have their own money and different things along those lines. But there's also not necessarily that education that comes along with it. And so I do tend to find that that's another area of my passion when it comes to money and finances, is helping women, especially to understand what they can do to increase their position and increase their knowledge about the opportunities within the financial world.
Oh, okay. So what was it specifically that, I mean, you kind of maybe alluded to it, that decided you to move into the finance industry and become a financial advisor?
A great deal of it has to do, of course, with the fact of using my education. I have a dual major, so to speak, in the accounting, finance, marketing world. And I put myself through school with working in retail. And when you work in retail, you often meet people that you've never met before, day in, day out. And you're waiting and helping and giving that good customer service. And so I've always been finding myself in a place where I'm taking that combination of knowledge with that empathy that comes with making relationships and getting to know people. I was originally in the financial services about 30 some years ago, and then most recently came back around and found that niche where I specialize in that doesn't necessarily get defined as much as a true financial advisor or an agent or even as a CPA. It takes all of these different areas of expertise and it molds them together into something that's very unique. And I find that for me personally, other than the fact that I get to help people, that it's still challenging and interesting and fun. And it's something that I can do day in and day out and also make a difference.
So what are some of the values that really drive you, what you're doing, and how is that really helping you to help your clients?
One of the strongest values, and it's kind of hard to talk about yourself in a way when it comes to things that a person really believes in, because you're kind of saying, okay, these are things that I'm really um that are about me. But part of the reason I'd like people to get to know me as much as possible is that there is a friendship that gets developed. But I have always believed it's a little bit like the golden rule. Do you if you do right by people, and help people the best that you possibly can, then you're rewarded yourself by seeing people happy, by changing their lives. And also, it frankly helps me to take care of my family and my goals and different things along those lines too. So if you treat people right, good things come to you.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning, and I do believe it as an advisor myself, I do believe that really the financial business is not about money, it's about relationships. And, and it's not even about money because so often when I was an advisor and I would ask clients, there were several questions. The money is really just a means to get to something. So when you're building that relationship, it's really important to really find out what is it that somebody values? What are the values that, your clients have in order to really truly help them? Because like I said, it's not really about money. I mean, money, yes, it helps us to get to the means of things, but I really appreciate what you have mentioned. It's really about a relationship. It's really a relationship business when you're looking at the financial business. So what's one of the life lessons that about money that you have learned that kind of helps you to guide your clients as you're meeting with them and building that relationship with them?
A life lesson that I think is very critical, like you just said, it's building relationships. But at the core of building relationships, of course, I've mentioned the word empathy and getting to know people. I think it's disappointing. It's personally disappointing to me the more I really look outside my own purview that there's very little trust out there. And when we start to talk about people's finances, whether somebody's got a little or they've got medium or they've got large, that you, regardless of where you're coming from, in order to make a decision with what you have financially, you're looking for people that you can trust. And that trust in this world, you really only have one shot at it. People talk about how hard it is to replace and repair personal relationships or business relationships once trust is broken. And we don't use that word trust, I think, often enough when we're doing our planning, make not literally talking to a client, say, I want you to trust me. You can't do that. That's not how it is. It's more implied. It's more inherent. It's really that fabric that weaves people and puts people together. And it's something though that's very difficult to put your finger on until you've lost it. And then, as we know, if you look even beyond the financial services world, that that can be very impactful on somebody's life, no matter all the different things. You talk medical field, you talk legal field, any of the others. Medical field, shoot, we trust doctors and surgeons to cut into us, and we have to kind of hand that over blindly. When a person is coming to me or my team and they're saying, okay, here's what I have, this is what I've managed to do to plan for my retirement, and then what can we do, they're trusting me to help guide them as much as possible with the best wisdom as possible with their nest egg. And that's an incredible amount of trust.
Oh,
And
for
it's
sure.
incredibly important. And I may not have completely answered your question from the angle you talked about, but it is something that's I think very valuable to make sure not to leave on the table.
Yeah. No, what you're mentioning, and again, we unfortunately do live what I would call the post-trust era. There has been so many things that have happened in society that it is different, difficult to go and trust. But I think one way from where I'm understanding what you do is you really want to go and get to know that that client. You want to know what is the reason. Like I look at it this way, whatever money they might have, they have accumulated, there is a story behind it. And I remember the story that I've heard. It was another financial advisor. Actually, it was his uh, no, he was a financial educator, and his mother was basically taking her whole inheritance to a financial advisor, and it was only $100,000. And I think because I can't remember what happened in the market, funds have gone down, and she was really distraught. And the advisor just kind of said, "Well, it's only 20% of whatever that was." And she said, "No, no, you don't understand. That was my husband's money that he received. Like there was a meaning behind it, and that gets really sometimes blurred in the financial
Hmm.
services, where it's kind of like, oh, well, what's the interest rate? What's that? There is that personal story behind it that is, kind of really more impactful, and treating people kind of from the perspective of, hey, what is that story behind it, and learning more about that.
I probably talk to one to, well, I wanted to say 2 to 3 people a week, brand new people that I've talked to, and the majority have in common this story or a time where, and I don't ever want to bash any part of the financial services industry, but sometimes knowing that, here's, like you said, this finite amount, and it means a lot, and we don't want to see it go down, but the story after story where I went to this person, and it, like 2008 to 2012 is a perfect example, but the funds went down by so much, and I'm always being told, well, that's okay, it'll grow again. And it's like, well, yeah, you, Mr. 38-year-old, I'm giving an actual example of someone I
Yeah.
talked to not that long ago. This 38-year-old told me this. This is a lady that I work with. She said, but I'm 64. I don't have the longer runway. And that, I think it still lacks, like you said, this area of distrust, the, it just, so many things have happened post COVID, but also I did this as a tutorial not that long ago. There is such a general lack of financial education. A lot of people talk about the fact that the schools don't really teach it. I mean, there was consumer math and sometimes different things along those lines where people used to learn how to balance a checkbook. Now nobody carries a checkbook. And so many of the people, if you really look at it, either grandparents or parents on some level are coming off of like the Great Depression years, and then the years of robust and money, that people often, if they were trying to learn it by osmosis from their parents, they really weren't getting, necessarily things that were economically the same as what the parents went through. So there is a general lack of financial education that the schools and the parents aren't providing, that people are going to social media to find. And so that's where that empathy and that trust has to come through in words and impression, first impression, because if people are meeting each other over Zoom, if they're doing things and people are looking for education through social media, there's a whole different level of connection. And I know I've kind of dove off into something a little bit deep, but it is very important too when it comes to digesting the importance that a person like myself, yourself in the financial services, how important that role really is, and how much people are really seeking to find information that can be relevant, as well as having the opportunity to protect their own money, make it grow as much, and have those resources at their fingertips, so that, like you said, that if they have only this money that came from their family and they don't want to have it get lost and they want it to grow, that there's that connection that can be made. There's just so many things that really, when you look at it, sometimes I say this to people, it's like, you don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but there's just so many things out there that are impacting people's decisions these days in finances. And it doesn't help if there's not that core foundation or resources for that.
For sure. Well, and talking about the foundation, I think this kind of leads to the next question that I was going to have. I believe that we all kind of have what I would call these money stories. And often the money stories create a relationship that we all have with money. And again, depending on what your upbringing was, the money story is going to be different. When it comes down to, I kind of always say there's kind of these two worlds that I tend to see that people live in. They either live in this world of scarcity, or they live in this world of abundance. And like, for myself, I was originally born in Czechoslovakia. I definitely was kind of in the world of scarcity because of just the socioeconomic things that there were. But when I kind of look at people, people have the same thing, depending on what kind of they've heard when it comes down to the story about money. And often we kind of inherit these stories about money from our parents, and we never really go and question them. And these are the stories that really go and shape our lives. So, if you look at yourself, can you see that, there is kind of a money stories that either you have or that you have seen with clients that you have kind of helped them to reshape what and how they look at money, and that has really truly helped them to create more as far as what they've had.
Yes, yes. When I grew up, now I would have grown up actually with parents that would have come off of, I mentioned already that they were college educated, but actually would have, especially on my mom's side, come off of those Great Depression years. And there was a lot of just conservative with the money, that there was always that feeling of scarcity that came because of how difficult some of the life was coming off of those Great Depression years. I was taught, and a lot of people were taught in my age group when we were coming through, like as babysitters or dog walkers or going and detasseling corn or something, because I grew up in the Midwest. Most of our parents were teaching us that for every dollar that we earned, 50 cents went towards savings. It was kind of like, okay, now here's your new money. 50% you can do to pay your bills or put gas in the car or wherever you're at in your age group. And another 50% goes for savings for something special or something along those lines, or when there's an emergency. This is how a lot of people were taught. Now, because I've noticed, I've actually been invited at the university level to speak with students and visit with students that are about to graduate at the university level, that the first thing that they do is pay themselves first. And that's also very similar to how I was raised when money came in. You pay yourself first. Put that first 10% away from your paychecks, pretend it didn't even land in your bank account. It immediately goes to I teach them to put them in high interest bank accounts. Put that aside and it's there for the emergencies. And then once you get to the point that you've got at least 6 months of living expenses, then you start to look at other things that you can do with your money, and to be able to enjoy your money, so to speak, and what that next move is. But that is one of the life lessons that I still take today, that I try to teach to young adults as they're starting to become professionals.
Yeah, and it's important to go over it and review them. And I do agree with you. I think, basic financial education should be at the school level. They
Mm-hmm.
get a whole bunch of things that are when it comes down to it, with the education, what they're taught, and finances are not. And it creates, unfortunately, environment, especially when they move into the college years where they don't really know, and they start to mismanage the monies, because I think when they get into college or universities, credit card
Yep,
companies give
credit
them credit
cards.
cards, carte blanche, and then they go and spend it. They don't realize that, no, that's not an income. Somebody has to go and repay it, and it's not really the great start. But what do you think is the most powerful kind of belief someone can have about money, and why you feel that way?
I think you touched on it. The fact that it's just so easy to treat money as if it's invisible, because we're moving money back and forth on apps on our phone, just as the same phone that we're going in and talking to people on Instagram, or like they say, slide into somebody's DMs, or we're watching another reel or something on TikTok. Everything is right there at our fingertips, and it becomes invisible. It's not real. And we keep kind of going into that cycle even more and more. I'm not a big person that is very knowledgeable about cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or anything along those lines. But if you really look at it, step back, it is also kind of invisible as well. And this is where, and I do take issue with a lot of the things that Dave Ramsey teaches, but the one thing that I do hold on to, and another thing that I've tried to take to today's world as far as money goes, is his envelope system. The idea that cash, so you pay yourself first with savings, and then you look at what your bills are, and you have an envelope where you're putting that cash into the envelope, and you're squirreling it away until it's needed. So if your light bill's usually $100 a month, then you're putting $100 into an envelope paying your light bill. But if it's something like your car insurance and you're paying that every 6 months, you're putting the monthly version into that envelope. I still am passionate, and I have an amazing electronic spreadsheet and Excel spreadsheet that electronically will help somebody to track that same kind of envelope system. Because if we don't make the money real and tangible, then it doesn't feel real. And it's just so easy to get into that spiral. And like you said, about the credit cards, so many students coming out of college and graduating, they're used to spend, spend, spend. They've racked up all these amazing levels of student loans for a large part. And then now, okay, now I'm going to make $75,000 at my job. This is far more than what I've made. This 10 times more than what I've been making every year. Now I have all this money. Money's invisible. I've got these bills and debt. Somehow you have to try to make it tangible still. Otherwise, it just keeps perpetuating itself.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning is actually having a system. And what people need to realize, if they don't have a system, they actually have a system how they're managing their money. It just might not be as efficient as what you mentioned with with the envelopes or doing it electronically. But there needs to be a purposeful way of managing money where I do believe that a lot of people kind of do it by default, where they don't really think about it. Money comes in, money goes out, and they don't really think about it. And suddenly there is not enough month at the end of the money, and it's kind of like, what do we do now? So that's definitely something that needs to be. And it is very easy to borrow money and to get yourself into debt. And I think this is the challenge where, especially a lot of young people will have, where they don't fully understand the impact of that and the impact of racking that debt up, and then, trying to get out of it becomes much more difficult. So, when we're talking about this, what is kind of the one piece of financial advice that you personally feel that, everyone should hear about? What would that one piece be?
Other than the core that I usually mention, that pay yourself first. Because if you don't pay yourself first, then most of the time you end up short on cash. I've lately moved more towards an always be curious
Mm.
mantra, so to speak. Always be curious, because just as there's so many things in the world that are constantly changing, AI now, there's a lot going on with AI. People were talking about that a lot, are talking about it almost the same way as they started to talk about cryptocurrency, 5, 10 years ago, in different versions. When it comes to finances in particular, always be curious, be willing to listen, because what was good for our parents is not necessarily good for today and won't necessarily be the right thing for your children. And if we don't stay curious, then we're missing out on opportunities to either shift dollars over to a place where it can earn more and grow more, or miss out on the opportunity to uh, enjoy more money later on in life. And we can't, that's another one, and I am going to say this one more time because you can't say it enough. Plan for the future and be willing to put money aside for the future, because if you don't, you may not really have much of an enjoyable future.
So that's great advice, Shaunelle. Curiosity, and I think this is where we had an advantage when we were children. I think children were very curious. They were always exploring new things and looking for things from a different way or from a different perspective. Two, when we're talking about different stories, like be curious. Like, why do you believe what you believe when it comes down to money? I think that's a great advice in life generally, not just around finances. So let's just switch gears a little bit. Let me ask you this. What does it mean to really live a life well lived? And how do you help your clients kind of connect with their, their finances with their vision or purpose or why they're doing what they're doing?
Man, that's a really beautiful question. Of course, everybody's going to answer the question differently about what does it mean to live a life well lived. I do believe, though, for the majority of people, that finances are always, whether a person literally says it or implies it, that that is something that's very important, and that the financial health is part of living a life well lived. I talk to people and listen to people, like I mentioned, well, all day long, all over the country, even. And that is a common thread, that ability or that desire to at least be comfortable. People define comfortable different ways, but typically it means to be able to feel less financial stress. Typically, it means not to have to give things up in order to live. And that's something that used to be the way it was for people when they went into retirement. A majority, and I alluded to this earlier, people coming off of the Second World War, off of the Great Depression here in the United States, especially, that then there was a period of a lot of wealth and a lot of growth, and families grew and people moved on. A lot of things, industries really took shape in the 50s, 60s, etc. And there was a lot more people, a larger percentage of people who were comfortable in retirement. And now that's not really such the case. There are more and more people who are having to make sacrifices in retirement because the types of careers, there aren't as many pensions that are being supplied anymore by employers. That's becoming less and less and less all the time. 401ks and other tax deferred retirement accounts were designed to be supplemental to a pension, not to be the only retirement. And then you go one step further, with 70 some percent of the households in America have only a net worth of $190,000. Most people would say you can't live off of that. That seems like a lot of money for a today period or tomorrow or 5 years, but to replace people's income, that's not any way to live. I hear people wanting to spend more time with their family. I see people living longer and it being more difficult to have enough money without making sacrifices. And what I strive to do, and what my team strives to do, and what my resources within the industry strive to do, is deliver on at least every effort to double the amount of retirement dollars. And that's within systems, and that is within reality, that that can be done for most people, at least to double. So if a person is one of those people that's worked really, really hard and they've saved up $200,000, and to be able to stretch that at least to 400,000, allow somebody to be able to live more comfortably longer, possibly take a trip, be able to at least go see family, be able to care for themselves, to be able to enjoy and relax a little bit. There's just so many things converging. Inflation, people living longer, higher expenses, less saved up, that are converging together, that the more that more dollars can be enjoyed by somebody in their retirement, the more you're helping somebody to have like a gift. Most people get pretty excited when they start to see at least that their money's going to last longer than just 10 years or something along those lines. It's a wave of relief for people that they don't have to make all the sacrifices all at once.
Yeah. I think what you're mentioning, and I can't remember who said the quote, But they basically said, listen, when it comes down to retirement, it's really about a lifestyle, right? I mean, everybody could retire right now. It just means that your lifestyle might need to go down because you may not have enough money. So if there are strategies that somebody can go and take a look at where you can stretch whatever you have, that's definitely helpful. I think the other, my view is, and I work with a lot of advisors, and I'm an advisor myself. I think kind of the whole idea of the traditional retirement where you reach a certain age and then you just don't do anything. I think that's going kind of a little bit sideways. Not but I also feel like that people should want to work because they want to work, not because they're forced to work, which I think is the kind of the separate on it. Like I look at myself, I don't believe that I will ever retire. I can't imagine kind of just to sit and do nothing. The picture of sitting on the beach and not doing anything, that's kind of not where I'm at. So I think the values of individuals is really changing and what they're looking at. So, defining, life well lived is very personal, but at the same time, I think it can be shaped and people can, going back to what you mentioned just previously, being curious, because there's many different ways how to achieve the outcome that you're after. And really, without that curiosity, it's going to be very difficult. And again, we're kind of talking about all of the stories and, the traditional way. And you mentioned that even with finances, how, the challenges that, young people are dealing with right now when it comes down to credit cards, like our parents, grandparents, they never had to deal with that. And, moving more into this virtual currency and everything that's going, it's going to be even more, I don't want to say difficult, but more challenging from the perspective of how to deal with it, because it's so much easier to go to spend, and I think we're going to date each other here. We go into the store with, a $50 bill, and it's like, I'm not going to buy that today because I don't want to break that 50 or 100 or wherever that might be. When you put it on a credit card, you don't see it. It's much
Right.
easier to go and spend. At the same time, and one of the reasons why I kind of exited out of the financial industry, there is kind of the whole side of it where it's not just all about focusing on save, 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 and scrimp. And you kind of mentioned Dave Ramsey kind of says rice and beans. I kind of looking at it also, looking at what you've mentioned, the curiosity, and saying like, hey, what if we put all of that energy of save, save, save and create and put it onto the other side where we're now, hey, what can we create? What other opportunities are there that we can really go and create more as opposed to just focusing so much on the save? That was actually one of the reasons why I got out of the financial industry. I felt like it was all about save, save, save. And I started learning things, reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, that kind of shifted my
Oh, yeah.
perspective. What do you mean my house is not the biggest assets, it's the biggest liability? And it's just a different view or perspective. And it doesn't say that one's right or one's wrong. It's just really what people need to ask, even with the question, what's a life well lived? What's the right thing for you? And I think what I'm gathering with, speaking with you, that uh, at the end of it, it's not just about money. It's about really the stories. It's about the meanings that you have, and everybody's going to have something personal. And again, it doesn't make anything right or wrong, right?
Correct. It is. It is very personal, and when we're recording this, we're coming up on the holidays, and more and more people are gathering with their loved ones, and I think each day, each month and year, there's more and more people that are kind of counting their blessings by family time, and even getting, well, especially with the post pandemic when we weren't getting together, so many things were defined by that period of time and coming out of that period of time. But to be comfortable to be able to buy the plane ticket to go be with family, or to be able to pay for the gas and the travel to be able to see family, at least to alleviate that stress, is important. And like you said, that you mentioned about what I said about Dave Ramsey, it is very true. The more you convert to cash and the more you're actually holding on to that $50 bill or $100 bill, the more real it is that you are spending that money. And that is always one of those premises that he goes with, that I think that is still valuable today in some way, shape, or form. Especially, my gosh, Google Pay and everything else, Apple Pay, that's on our phones. It's just so easy to spend.
Yeah. And now you
It's
don't have
been
to do
like
anything. You just touch. You just
touch.
tap. So it's taking that whole so put it that way. Nowhere we're talking about that technology is bad, but it's just what's the impact on your life? And I think this is really what it comes down to. Like all of these things and even money and everything, people say, oh, money is the root of all evil. No, it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. But it's not that it is evil. It's the way that you view it and what you do with it and how you use it. Because I also believe that money is one of the resources that we have that we can do a lot of good things with, not just kind of focusing on the negative things. So it just comes down to, again, what are those stories? What are the things that how you view it? And I'm going to go back to, I really appreciate what you said. Just be curious, like start asking yourself questions. Why do I believe what I believe about money? I know for me, when I grew up, I had a very negative view of money because of growing up and everything that I have gone through with family and where I grew up and everything. And I have spent the time to start asking myself those questions. Well, why do I believe that? And there is a great story. I'm just going to make it really short, of the ham story, where we're just talking about getting to the holidays, but this was a Thanksgiving dinner, and there was a big ham that was going to be done. And the husband comes home with this beautiful ham, gives it to the wife. She grabs it and cuts off like 1/3 off of the end and puts it into the oven. And the husband's going like, "Why are you doing that?" And she goes, "I don't know. That's the way my mother did it." He says, "Okay, well, they
Oh,
pick
how
up the phone
fun.
and call the mother and ask the mother, why did she do it?" And she goes, "I don't know why we did that. My mother always done that." Okay, so they phone up the grandmother and they ask the question. And the grandmother goes, "Well, dear, I'm not sure why you're cutting the ham, but the reason I was cutting the ham is because my pot wasn't big enough to fit the ham in."
Oh,
So
I
now
love
you
it.
have, like three generations of people or two generations of people doing something, not knowing why, because it was kind of like that's what we do. Nobody asked the question why. And I think when it comes to finances, I think it becomes really important as we're talking about this. Like, why do you think about money or finances, even your spending habits? Why are you doing this? Becomes really, really important. Uh, you know, is there a story that maybe you can share with clients as we're talking about the meaning and all of that stuff that really stand out for you, that when you met with somebody and what you shared with them around money and how to manage it and all of that stuff, that has a really left a meaningful impact on you or on your client from that?
I think back to, especially within the last 5 years, getting back into financial services, especially in this lane, so to speak, of helping people to plan or handle their retirement and be ready for the future, so to speak. I actually have a short book started on this particular subject because it was so impactful to meet this woman. But uh, the lady that I'm picturing right now, she was a very recent widower. Her husband had passed away, and really, she had a small fortune that had been an inheritance from her parents. So her parents had owned a funeral home. They had done really, really well. Especially her dad was the one who was really in charge of a lot of that. And they had saved a lot of money. And there was a nice inheritance. And her and her husband were getting ready to retire. And then her husband passed away. But that was not her area of expertise of being able to make the decisions about this nest egg that she had inherited, except for the fact that it had afforded her the opportunity to retire early. But then husband passed away. And when I met her, she had really was not familiar with a lot of where the money was at. Most of the statements, because she was in such a period of very um, expected, that she was grieving. So we were grieving the loss of mom, who had passed away after uh, her dad had passed away, but then her husband passes away. That the emotions that she was going through, she was not even able to open up the envelopes that had all the statements. And that need to find the opportunity and the way to start getting this sorted, and how do I start to manage and tackle those emotions that go along with it to be able to put those pieces together. And that's probably what forms a lot of the language that I use now, because everybody has a story like that on some level, maybe not as deep as this particular person had, and where she was in a world where everything around her seemed to be spiraling, and she had to hold herself together and be there for the adult daughters who had just lost their father, and being able to sort all this out and having that financial education as well as getting it all organized. That is a very difficult thing to do when a person is on that high emotion side, when everything is more like tears rather than decision making. And that's very true, because like you just asked me a little bit ago, what makes people, happy? Where do you find that happiness? Well, sometimes it is just merely getting on top of that and trying to get control of life too. And emotions and money are tied together, whether you're taking one small slice of life or if you're looking at the whole pie. They're very much interrelated. And there can be times where the envelopes just don't get opened, and that doesn't mean that the bills go away. That doesn't mean that we're not missing out on opportunities, that if we were able to sort things out. So I'm a huge proponent of at least give your children, if you're a grandparent, an adult, a young parent, at least do everything you possibly can to plan ahead. Think of your loved ones. It's not a negative thing to talk about a funeral. It's not negative about talking about dying. It's a fact of life. And give and channel the emotions that go with it to doing something better for your children so that they don't have to go through everything at a time when the emotions are exhausting, and then to add the finances and all the other decisions that need to be made.
Oh, for sure. Listen, you stated a fact. Nobody's getting off of this earth alive. I mean, we're all going to die at one point. And yeah, just having the conversation. And I know it's a difficult conversation to have because nobody likes to think about that fact, but it is a fact of life. And I think just having that, and again, being curious and knowing that. I mean, I've seen a lot of families that are devastated, and it's the hardest time to make any decisions. And sometimes you got to make the hardest decisions, and then you're like trying to make it right or perfect, and then you're going to have regrets and all of that stuff, where if you start having the conversation ahead of time, it becomes much easier to go in and deal with that. So a little bit more on a personal level, like what, and I think you've, through this conversation that we've had as we're kind of in closing in right now, what is it that really motivates you to keep showing up, to keep doing your work, even during the hardest days that you're kind of going through? What is that motivation for you?
Oh, there's always a story to tell. That's why. That's an interesting observation, because I've actually done a couple of videos that have actually focused on the fact that right now my personal journey uh, was accentuated about 3 months ago with an unexpected injury and in an accident where I should never have even really been injured to the level that I was injured. And I I only just recently finally started to leak maybe a little bit about it, but the idea is that there are, it just is so humbling. If you look at life and you look at these defining moments in life where you're actually kind of plopped down, and my visual literally happened to me. Okay, time to focus. What's really important about life? And then I've taken to the camera and turned it on and I've even shown the back brace that I'm currently wearing, because there are measures that can be taken, because something like this type of injury that I have can be devastating, not only personally, but and as far as the emotions and then the pain and everything else that goes along with it, and the recovery side of it. But there's also the financial side. There are There are households that can be devastated. The number two reason for losing, going on into foreclosure on a mortgage on a home loan is derived somewhere along the lines with unexpected medical bills. At least 56% of the bankruptcies come from unexpected medical bills. And there are resources within the financial world, life insurance being one of them. There are resources to help supplement those types of expenses. And so many people, again, back to my comment that I was saying about that gift of taking care of your family and making sure that you have your plans lined up, doesn't, it goes beyond the idea of having a life insurance policy so that the expenses are covered. But there's also, I mean, most people see it as short-term, long-term care. Those things are different types of things to tap into through an employer. But then there's also certain types of life insurance policies that have living benefits, and those living benefits can be tapped into to utilize the policy while someone's still alive in order to offset lost income or medical bills. And I found that to be the perfect, this situation to be the perfect way to say these things are real. You can be kickboxing one day and 3 days later you can't even stand up. And that's how fast life changes. And if I can at least take this is just one small example, and I'm not even a huge influencer out there, but if I can use my own experience though to help encourage someone just to nudge a little bit that their life would be the same, it's more impactful, I think, to share my story than to say, hey, I was working with this family over here and they were getting ready to do this and this and thus, and they put it off and put it off, and all of a sudden they were in a car accident. Now they can't do it. That's vague. This is real. This is in front, and it is a real example, and it is something that I think that's that's what you do. You try to help people as best as you can, and the more that you're real, the more that maybe they understand that you really are out here to be someone who helps them. And I get excited about it because everybody's different, their situation is different. And in most cases, like I said, with a few tweaks here and there and a little bit of listening, can at least try to extend their happiness in life, in retirement, day-to-day wealth. And wealth, like you said, gets measured in a lot of different ways. And it's not just the dollars, but I think it is also having a little bit of stress relief from the financial burdens.
Yeah. No, I have this one saying that has truly helped me, when we're going through tough situation and everything, that, what life is always working for us. And the way that I've heard it, and I really like this quote, is life is either working for you so that, yeah, you're getting out of life what you want, or it's working on you so that you can become the
Mhm.
person that it's working for you. And whatever work you're doing, it's always working. We just might not know and understand why. And nowhere am I, discounting kind of the accident as that you have gone through and what you're going through right now. But I think we both know, and I hope that you will agree with it, that there potentially is a lesson from this, that there might be something that's going to come out of it that's going to be greater, even though right now it's difficult to see it. And I know when I look at my past and everything that I've gone through, the times that were the toughest, I look at them now going like, they were the greatest gifts that I was given because they allowed me to become the person that I'm today. And it's difficult to remember that when we're going through things, but it's good to be
Yeah.
reminded of that. And I think even when it comes down to finances and everything, it's a matter of just being mindful that when something is happening, it's difficult to understand the whole situation. I tend to look at it this way. It's like when we're going through life, we're seeing the kind of, the backside of the rug. We're seeing all of the knots and everything on there, where God sees the front side of it. He knows what the whole thing looks like. We're just trying to figure out, looking at the back of it, going like, this thing's just a mess. Where, I think when we look at our life, it's a beautiful tapestry. We just not necessarily are seeing it. So it's a little bit more
Mhm.
difficult. So for those that want to connect with you and really want to, reach out to you, what may be the best way for them to reach out to you?
That's a great segue. Another thing that I'm really passionate about is my family. I'm partially named after one of my grandmothers, and when I went to start this company several years ago, I landed on Blazing Star. Blazing Star is actually a very beautiful purple flower, but it's also got kind of a metaphor, so to speak, for something that's bright and shiny. And it is in honor of my grandmother. So if you would like to reach out to me, Go Blazing Star would be the website. Typically, if you do anything with Blazing Star and on Instagram or Facebook, you can find myself and my company and my team. And that would those any of those would be ways to connect with us. And there's ways to go ahead and push the button to speak or to send a message.
Well, that's a great story. And again, we're back to, as we were talking about in this conversation, really the financial business is all about relationships, but it's really all about stories, and we all have stories. And I appreciate you sharing the story of how you came up with the name of your company and the meaning behind that. And again, it's all about kind of building that relationship. Before we close, is there anything else that you kind of want to go and share with our listeners as far as if they want to go and reach out to you, or anything else that you want to add to what we spoke about today?
I think I'd like to close with the idea again of encouraging people, as we're almost always making New Year's resolutions, and then they kind of go by the wayside. But again, back to the always be curious, always be willing to listen, follow the money trail. If you're doing a rabbit hole dive into social media, there are new and different ways. It's just like any other industry that's out there. It seems like, and right now we're in a period where so many people are kind of caught in this rut of doing the traditional, because like you mentioned with the ham, this is what we've always seen. We go this direction, and I could get very literal about what the typical way of handling retirement is. And there are ways to do things with just a little bit of difference with people who really know what they're talking about. And it's a very, very narrow niche. And that's why if I can't help, I can at least help make those connections. But be curious, be willing to listen, be open minded. There are people that really are passionate about helping you, and don't stop until you find those people.
Yeah, that's great. And again, we're back to kind of the whole topic. It's about relationships, and just because you go and meet somebody and they're an advisor doesn't mean that you have to go and work with them. Find somebody that really resonates with the message, and that's kind of the purpose of this podcast, is to really connect with advisors more on the person level, go and dive deep into more of the values and the reasons why the advisor does what they do. So, Shaunelle, I appreciate your time. This has been great, and if we will have all of the information for people to go in contact with you, and we'll talk to you soon again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.